I'm Jessica Williams, 28, and 3 days ago my husband Michael smiled at me over breakfast on our honeymoon and said, "The hiking trail today is perfect for accidents." What he doesn't know is that I've been secretly recording every conversation since our wedding night when I overheard him talking to someone named Tyler about making my death look natural. In exactly 6 hours, Michael thinks he's taking me on a romantic sunset hike in the Colorado Rockies, where his secret accomplice will be waiting in the shadows. But what my loving husband doesn't realize is that I've already set multiple insurance policies in motion, and by tonight, the deadly truth about my picture-perfect marriage will be exposed to everyone who matters most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The path that led me to that terrifying breakfast conversation began 2 years earlier when I thought I'd finally found my fairy tale ending. After graduating summa cum laude from Denver University with a degree in digital marketing, I had poured every ounce of my energy into building Williams Digital Solutions from the ground up. Working 18-hour days from my cramped studio apartment, surviving on instant ramen and pure determination, I slowly transformed my one-woman operation into a thriving social media consulting firm that generated over $200,000 annually. By the time I turned 26, I had achieved everything I'd dreamed of during those late nights studying in the university library. My downtown Denver condo overlooked the bustling 16th Street Mall, its floor-to-ceiling windows filling the space with natural light that made my carefully curated furniture gleam. The mortgage was completely paid off, a feat that filled me with immense pride every time I walked through my front door. My business bank account held enough savings to weather any storm, and I'd even been responsible enough to secure a substantial life insurance policy worth $500,000 when I first incorporated my company. Success felt incredible, but it also felt lonely. While my college friends were getting married and starting families, I was building PowerPoint presentations at midnight and networking at industry conferences on weekends. My social life consisted mainly of business dinners and the occasional drinks with David Chen, my brilliant business partner, who handled the technical side of our digital campaigns, while I focused on client relationships and creative strategy. Everything changed on a crisp October evening at the annual Denver Children's Hospital fundraising gala. I had purchased a table for Williams Digital Solutions, partly for the tax benefits but mostly because supporting local charities felt like the right thing to do with my newfound success. The ballroom at the Brown Palace Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant evening gowns, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated philanthropy that made me feel like I truly belonged in Denver's professional community. That's when I first spotted Michael Thompson across the crowded room. He stood near the silent auction display, tall and distinguished in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, studying the architectural drawings being auctioned for charity. His dark hair was touched with just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom and experience, while his confident posture commanded attention without seeming arrogant. When he turned and our eyes met across the room, his warm smile sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. "Excuse me," he said, approaching my table with the kind of easy confidence that suggested he was accustomed to social situations like this. "I couldn't help but notice you're with Williams Digital Solutions. I've heard incredible things about your work with the Morrison Restaurant Group's rebranding campaign." His knowledge of my professional achievements immediately impressed me. Most men at these events either ignored my business accomplishments entirely or made condescending comments about my age and gender in the corporate world. Michael, however, spoke with genuine respect and curiosity about my marketing strategies and creative vision. "I'm Michael Thompson," he continued, extending his hand with a firm, warm grip. "I run Thompson Architectural Design here in Denver. We specialize in sustainable commercial buildings and residential developments." Our conversation flowed effortlessly from professional topics to personal interests. Michael revealed that he was 35, recently divorced after what he described as an amicable separation from his college sweetheart, who had wanted different things from life. He spoke thoughtfully about his passion for creating environmentally conscious buildings that would leave a positive impact on future generations, and he asked insightful questions about my journey from struggling college graduate to successful entrepreneur. "Would you like to get some fresh air?" he suggested after we'd been talking for nearly an hour. The hotel's rooftop terrace has an amazing view of the city lights. Standing on that rooftop overlooking downtown Denver, with the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of approaching snow from the Rocky Mountains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Michael listened intently as I described my business dreams and personal goals, never once checking his phone or letting his attention wander. When I mentioned my love for hiking and outdoor adventures, his face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "I know every trail within 100 miles of Denver," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "There's nothing quite like watching the sunrise from a mountain peak. It puts everything in perspective and reminds you what's truly important in life." By the time the evening ended, we had exchanged phone numbers and made plans for dinner the following Friday. As I drove home through the quiet streets of downtown Denver, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time since starting my business, I felt like I'd met someone who could be both a romantic partner and an intellectual equal. Our first official date exceeded every expectation I'd harbored during the week of anticipation leading up to it. Michael chose Mercantile Dining and Provision, an upscale restaurant in Union Station that perfectly balanced sophistication with warmth. He arrived 10 minutes early, looking handsome in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that brought out the deep brown of his eyes. When I approached the hostess stand, he stood immediately and kissed my cheek with just the right amount of gentlemanly restraint. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, his appreciative gaze taking in my burgundy dress and carefully styled hair. "I've been looking forward to this all week." Dinner stretched into 4 magnificent hours of conversation that ranged from childhood memories to philosophical discussions about success and happiness. Michael shared stories about growing up in Colorado Springs, with parents who encouraged his artistic side while teaching him practical life skills. He described his college years studying architecture at Colorado State University, his early struggles to establish his firm, and his eventual success designing award-winning buildings throughout the Front Range. When he asked about my background, I found myself opening up in ways that surprised me. I told him about my middle-class upbringing, and preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In suburban Denver, my parents' initial skepticism about my entrepreneurial dreams, and the countless sacrifices I'd made to build my business from nothing. Instead of seeming intimidated by my success or making dismissive comments about ambitious women, Michael's admiration appeared completely genuine. "What you've accomplished is remarkable," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand gently. "Starting your own business takes incredible courage and determination. Most people talk about their dreams, but you actually made yours happen." After dinner, we walked through downtown Denver's illuminated streets, past the historic buildings and modern skyscrapers that formed the backdrop of my daily life. Michael pointed out architectural details I'd never noticed despite living in the city for years, sharing his professional insights with infectious passion. When we reached Confluence Park, where the South Platte River winds through the urban landscape, he suggested we sit on a bench and continue talking under the stars. "I have to be honest with you, Jessica," he said as we watched the river reflect the city lights. "I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a very long time. My divorce was finalized 2 years ago, and I wasn't sure I was ready to start dating again. But talking with you tonight feels completely natural." I appreciated his honesty about his past relationship, though I noticed he kept the details somewhat vague. When I asked about his ex-wife, he simply said they had grown apart over the years and wanted different things from their future together. The divorce had been civilized and mutually agreed upon, with no children involved to complicate the proceedings. "What about you?" he asked. "I find it hard to believe someone as incredible as you is still single." I laughed, explaining my previous focus on building my career and the challenges of dating while working 70-hour weeks. "I've had a few serious relationships over the years, but none of them could handle my ambition or understood why my business was so important to me. They wanted me to be available whenever they needed attention, without considering that I had professional responsibilities and goals of my own." Michael nodded thoughtfully. A woman's success should be celebrated, not resented. Any man who feels threatened by your achievements isn't worthy of your time or energy. By the time he walked me to my car at midnight, I knew this was the beginning of something special. Michael kissed me goodnight with perfect, gentlemanly restraint, leaving me wanting more while respecting appropriate boundaries for a first date. "I'd love to see you again soon," he said, his hand resting lightly on my car door. "Would you be interested in going hiking this weekend? I know a beautiful trail up in Golden that leads to some incredible views." Over the following months, Michael seamlessly integrated himself into my life in ways that felt both natural and exciting. Our hiking adventures became weekend traditions, with Michael introducing me to trails throughout the Colorado Rockies that showcased the state's breathtaking natural beauty. He possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of local geology, flora, and fauna that made every outing educational as well as romantic. During our hikes, Michael would point out different rock formations and explain their geological significance, or identify various wildflowers and birds we encountered along the way. His passion for the outdoors was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to our mountain adventures as much as our romantic dinners in the city. "There's something about being in nature that clarifies your priorities," he would often say as we reached a summit or scenic overlook. "All the stress and complications of daily life just fade away when you're surrounded by this kind of beauty." Our relationship progressed at a pace that felt perfectly comfortable for both of us. Michael respected my busy work schedule and never made me feel guilty about late nights at the office or weekend business obligations. Instead, he found creative ways to support my professional success, occasionally bringing dinner to my office during particularly demanding project deadlines, or sending encouraging text messages before important client presentations. In return, I made efforts to learn about his architectural work and attend industry events where I could network on his behalf. Michael's firm specialized in sustainable design principles, creating buildings that minimized environmental impact while maximizing energy efficiency. His passion for environmentally conscious construction aligned with my own values about corporate responsibility and making positive contributions to the community. 6 months into our relationship, Michael began introducing me to his social circle and professional contacts. His friends were educated, successful professionals who welcomed me warmly and seemed genuinely happy about Michael's obvious contentment. At dinner parties and social gatherings, I noticed how naturally Michael and I functioned as a couple, finishing each other's sentences and sharing inside jokes that had developed during our countless hours of conversation. The only aspect of Michael's life that remained somewhat mysterious was his family background. He mentioned his parents occasionally, describing them as retired and living in Arizona, but he rarely volunteered detailed stories about his childhood or extended family. When I asked about visiting them or meeting them during a hypothetical trip to Phoenix, Michael would deflect with vague comments about their busy retirement schedule or health issues that made travel difficult. Similarly, while Michael had been open about his divorce, he rarely discussed his ex-wife beyond the basic facts he'd shared on our first date. I respected his privacy and assumed he preferred not to dwell on painful memories from his past relationship. Everyone processes divorce differently, and I didn't want to pressure him to share more than he felt comfortable discussing. As our first anniversary approached, I realized I was genuinely in love with Michael Thompson in ways I'd never experienced with previous boyfriends. He possessed the perfect combination of emotional maturity, professional success, and physical attractiveness that I'd always hoped to find in a life partner. More importantly, he seemed to truly value my independence and ambition rather than feeling threatened by my success. During a particularly romantic weekend getaway to Aspen, as we watched the sunset from the deck of our mountain cabin, Michael brought up the topic of our future together. "Jessica," he said, taking my hands in his, as the golden light painted the surrounding peaks in brilliant colors. "This year with you has been the happiest of my life. I know we both value our independence and careers, but I keep imagining what it would be like to build a future together." My heart raced with excitement and anticipation. "I've been thinking the same thing," I admitted. "You're the first person I've ever dated who makes me want to share my life without sacrificing my individual goals and dreams." Michael smiled, pulling me closer as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I don't want to rush anything or put pressure on what we have," he said carefully. "But I want you to know that I'm serious about us. When I imagine my future, you're always part of it." We spent that entire weekend discussing our hopes and dreams for the future, talking about everything from career goals to travel plans to our thoughts about marriage and family. Michael expressed his desire to expand his architectural firm while maintaining its focus on sustainable design. I shared my plans to grow Williams Digital Solutions into a regional powerhouse that could compete with the major marketing agencies in Denver and beyond. "I love that you're so driven and ambitious," Michael said as we prepared breakfast together on Sunday morning. "Most men would feel intimidated by a woman who's built what you've accomplished, but I find it incredibly attractive. I want a partner who challenges me to be better, not someone who depends on me for everything." Those words meant everything to me. Throughout my adult life, I'd encountered too many men who claimed to support successful women, but ultimately expected their girlfriends to prioritize the relationship over professional achievements. Michael seemed genuinely different, celebrating my success while building his own impressive career. The proposal came 6 months later, on Christmas Eve, in a setting so romantic it seemed choreographed by Hollywood screenwriters. Michael had suggested we spend Christmas week at a luxury resort in Vail, ostensibly to enjoy some of Colorado's best skiing while escaping the holiday stress of family obligations and work deadlines. On Christmas Eve morning, he surprised me with a private hot air balloon ride over the snow-covered valleys surrounding Vail. As we floated silently above the pristine winter landscape, sipping champagne and marveling at the breathtaking views, Michael suddenly dropped to one knee in the balloon's basket. "Jessica Williams," he said, producing a stunning vintage engagement ring that sparkled brilliantly in the morning sunlight. "You've brought more joy and love into my life than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me?" Through tears of joy and overwhelming emotion, I said yes without hesitation. The ring fit perfectly, and as Michael slipped it onto my finger, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. We kissed as the balloon drifted over the majestic Rocky Mountains, sealing our engagement with a moment of perfect romantic bliss. The engagement period flew by in a whirlwind of wedding planning, business growth, and deepening love. Michael proved to be an ideal fiancé, offering opinions and assistance with wedding preparations while never trying to control or micromanage the process. He seemed genuinely excited about our upcoming marriage and frequently made comments about looking forward to calling me his wife. We chose Boulder as our wedding location, selecting a beautiful outdoor venue with stunning views of the Flatirons. The ceremony would be intimate, with about 75 guests, including family, close friends, and important professional contacts. Michael's guest list was notably smaller than mine, which he explained by mentioning that most of his family lived far away, and his social circle consisted mainly of work associates rather than lifelong friends. As our wedding day approached, I handled the typical pre-marriage administrative tasks that modern couples navigate together. I updated my life insurance policy to name Michael as the primary beneficiary, a practical decision that made perfect sense given our upcoming marriage. Michael suggested I might want to add his name to my business accounts for emergency access, which also seemed reasonable for a married couple sharing financial responsibilities. "It's just good planning," he explained when we met with my financial advisor to discuss combining certain aspects of our finances. "God forbid anything ever happened to you, but I should be able to access important accounts to handle necessary expenses or business obligations." I appreciated his practical approach to marriage and finances. Unlike some couples who argued about money and control, Michael and I seemed to share similar values about financial planning and responsibility. He never pressured me to make major changes to my business structure or personal investments, simply suggesting minor adjustments that would provide security and convenience for both of us. Our wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with perfect September weather that made the Boulder foothills look like a postcard. As I prepared for the ceremony in the bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids and feeling radiant in my designer gown, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me to this moment. In less than 3 years, I had transformed from a successful but lonely entrepreneur into a woman about to marry the man of her dreams. Michael had proven himself to be everything I'd hoped to find in a life partner: intelligent, supportive, romantic, and genuinely excited about sharing a future together. The ceremony itself was everything we dreamed it would be. Michael looked devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray suit as he waited for me at the altar, his face lighting up with pure joy when he saw me walking down the aisle. Our vows were personal and heartfelt, promising to support each other's dreams while building a life together based on love, respect, and partnership. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Michael's kiss was tender and filled with promise for our future together. As we walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I felt overwhelmed with happiness and gratitude for the incredible man I'd just married. The reception was magical, with dancing under the stars and heartfelt toasts from friends and family. Michael's best man, whom he introduced as his business partner James, gave a speech about Michael's dedication to his work and his obvious happiness since meeting me. My maid of honor, David Chen, spoke eloquently about watching me find true love after years of focusing solely on professional success. Late that evening, as we finally retired to our honeymoon suite at the luxury mountain resort we'd chosen for our wedding night, I felt like my fairy tale was complete. Michael carried me across the threshold with theatrical gallantry, both of us laughing at the traditional gesture, while genuinely cherishing the romantic significance of the moment. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, setting me down gently and kissing me with passionate intensity. "I love the way that sounds." "I love you, Mr. Thompson," I replied, meaning every word with complete sincerity. As we settled into bed together as husband and wife, I couldn't have imagined that within hours, my perfect marriage would begin revealing secrets dark enough to threaten my very life. Our first morning as husband and wife should have been filled with lazy kisses and whispered promises about our future together. Instead, it became the moment when my perfect fairy tale began cracking around the edges, revealing something far more sinister underneath the romantic facade I'd fallen in love with. Michael woke before dawn, which surprised me since we'd stayed up celebrating until nearly 3 a.m. I stirred drowsily as I felt him slip out of bed, assuming he was simply too excited to sleep late on our first day as a married couple. Through half-closed eyes, I watched him move quietly around our honeymoon suite at the Grand Mountain Resort, gathering his clothes with unusual urgency. "Going for a run, babe?" he whispered when he noticed I was awake. "I'm too energized to sleep. This mountain air always gets my blood pumping." His explanation seemed reasonable enough. Michael had always been an early riser with boundless energy, and the excitement of our wedding combined with the crisp Colorado mountain atmosphere could easily disrupt normal sleep patterns. I mumbled something affectionate and drifted back towards sleep, expecting to wake up to the smell of coffee and maybe some room service breakfast he'd ordered as a surprise. Instead, I was jolted fully awake an hour later by the sound of Michael's voice coming from the bathroom, speaking in urgent, hushed tones that immediately set my nerves on edge. He was clearly on a phone call, but his voice carried an intensity I'd never heard before, even during his most stressful business negotiations. "Everything went perfectly," he was saying, his words barely audible through the closed bathroom door. "She signed all the papers, changed the beneficiaries, everything we discussed. The timing couldn't be better." My heart began racing as I strained to hear more of the conversation. Who was he talking to at 6:30 in the morning on our honeymoon? And what papers was he referring to? The only documents I'd signed recently were the routine marriage-related updates to my insurance policies and financial accounts. "Don't worry about that," Michael continued, his voice taking on a reassuring tone that somehow made my stomach clench with anxiety. "She trusts me completely. She has no idea what's coming, and by the time we're finished, it'll be too late for her to do anything about it." The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Whatever Michael was discussing, it involved deception and planning that specifically targeted me. The loving husband who had carried me across the threshold just hours earlier was apparently coordinating some kind of scheme that I was completely unaware of. I forced myself to remain perfectly still, controlling my breathing and keeping my eyes closed in case Michael emerged from the bathroom unexpectedly. Every instinct screamed at me to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation for his secretive behavior and threatening words. But some deeper survival instinct warned me that revealing my awareness could put me in immediate danger. "The location is perfect," Michael's voice continued, slightly clearer now as he apparently moved closer to the door. "Isolated, no witnesses, and everyone will believe it was a tragic accident. Just like last time. Those two words hit me like a physical blow, confirming that whatever Michael was planning, he had done something similar before. My mind raced through everything I knew about his past, particularly his previous marriage that had ended in divorce. But now I wondered if divorce was really how that relationship had concluded. "Tyler knows exactly what to do," Michael said, and I heard the sound of water running, suggesting he was preparing to shower. "He's been practicing the route for weeks. When the time comes, he'll be in position and ready to execute the plan perfectly." "Tyler!" I mentally sorted through everyone Michael had introduced me to over the past 2 years, trying to remember anyone by that name. The only Tyler I could recall was someone Michael had mentioned briefly as a young architect he was mentoring, but he'd never introduced us or provided any details about this person's background or role in his life. The shower started running, giving me a few precious minutes to process what I'd overheard and decide how to respond. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone on the nightstand, desperate to call someone who could help me make sense of this nightmare. But who could I call? And what would I even say? That my husband of less than 24 hours was apparently planning something terrible involving someone named Tyler? I realized with growing horror that I was completely isolated in this situation. We were in a remote mountain resort, hours from Denver and my support network. My closest friends and family members believed I was on a blissful honeymoon with the man of my dreams. Even if I managed to contact someone, would they believe such an outrageous story about Michael, who had charmed everyone who met him? The shower stopped running, forcing me to quickly put my phone back and pretend to be asleep. Michael emerged from the bathroom fully dressed in hiking clothes, moving with quiet efficiency as he gathered his wallet and keys. I watched through barely opened eyelids as he paused beside the bed, studying my face with an expression I couldn't quite read in the dim morning light. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might have realized I was awake and had overheard his conversation. But then he leaned down and kissed my forehead with what appeared to be genuine tenderness, though now I questioned whether any of his affection had ever been real. "Sleep well, beautiful," he whispered. "I'll be back with coffee and pastries for breakfast. I love you." The words that should have filled me with warmth now made my skin crawl. After he left, I waited 10 minutes to ensure he was truly gone before jumping out of bed and frantically searching the suite for any clues about what he was planning. Michael had left his laptop behind, but it was password protected. His personal papers and documents were either locked away or apparently stored elsewhere. I did find his phone charger plugged into the wall outlet near his side of the bed, which struck me as odd since he'd obviously taken his phone with him for that mysterious early morning call. But then I noticed a second phone partially hidden beneath some magazines on the dresser, clearly a device I'd never seen before. With trembling fingers, I picked up the unfamiliar phone and tried to access it, but of course it was locked with a passcode. However, the screen showed several missed call notifications and text message previews that made my blood run cold. The most recent message preview read, "Dad, everything is set for Thursday. She won't know what hit her. Dad." This mysterious Tyler person was apparently Michael's son, not just some young architect he was mentoring. But Michael had repeatedly told me he had no children from his previous marriage. Why would he lie about having a son? And why was this son sending messages about something happening on Thursday with someone who won't know what hit her? I quickly calculated the dates. Thursday was 3 days away, which would be our 4th day in Aspen. Michael had already planned several activities for our honeymoon week, including a romantic sunset hike he'd been particularly enthusiastic about. Was that when whatever they were planning would happen? Another text message preview caught my attention. Mom's insurance paid out perfectly. This one should be even easier. Mom's insurance. The implications were staggering and horrifying. If Tyler was Michael's son, then Mom would refer to Michael's ex-wife. But Michael had told me she was alive and well, living somewhere on the East Coast after their amicable divorce. The reference to insurance paying out suggested something far more sinister had happened to her. I frantically tried different number combinations to unlock the phone, hoping to read the complete messages and gather more information about their plans. But after several failed attempts, the device locked completely, and I realized I was risking triggering some kind of security alert that might warn Michael I'd been snooping. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely function as the full scope of my situation became clear. I had married a man who was apparently planning to kill me, Just as he had likely killed his previous wife, he had a son who was actively involved in these plans, and they were coordinating something that would happen in just 3 days. The logical part of my mind insisted this couldn't be real, that I must be misunderstanding something or jumping to paranoid conclusions based on fragments of overheard conversation. But my instincts were screaming that I was in mortal danger, trapped in an isolated location with someone who had deceived me about fundamental aspects of his identity and history. I forced myself to think strategically rather than panic. If Michael and Tyler were planning to kill me during our honeymoon, they would want it to look like an accident to avoid suspicion and ensure Michael could collect on my life insurance policy. A hiking accident in the Colorado mountains would be believable, especially if I was unfamiliar with the terrain and dependent on Michael's supposed expertise. The thought of that sunset hike Michael had planned for Thursday filled me with terror. He had specifically chosen a trail he claimed to know well, in an area he described as breathtakingly beautiful but challenging for inexperienced hikers. At the time, his concern for my safety had seemed caring and protective. Now I realized he might have been laying the groundwork for my murder. I needed evidence and I needed help, but both seemed impossibly out of reach given my current circumstances. Michael would return soon with breakfast, expecting to find his loving wife ready to continue their romantic honeymoon. I had to act completely normal while secretly gathering information and figuring out how to protect myself. The irony was devastating. Just 24 hours earlier, I had been the happiest woman alive, convinced I'd found my perfect partner and ideal future. Now I was trapped in a nightmare scenario, where the man I'd pledged to love and trust was apparently planning my death. When Michael returned an hour later carrying coffee and fresh pastries from the resort's bakery, I was back in bed pretending to have just woken up. He greeted me with the same warm smile and affectionate kiss that had melted my heart for 2 years, but now every gesture felt like a calculated performance. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," he said, settling beside me with our breakfast. "How did you sleep?" "Wonderfully," I lied, forcing myself to smile and act like the blissfully happy newlywed he expected to see. "This bed is so comfortable, and I was exhausted after yesterday's celebration." Michael chatted cheerfully about his morning walk around the resort grounds, pointing out various hiking trails visible from our window and discussing his plans for our remaining days in Aspen. He seemed genuinely excited about showing me the natural beauty of the area, which made his deception even more chilling. "I've been thinking about that sunset hike I mentioned," he said, buttering a croissant with casual enthusiasm. "Thursday would be perfect timing. The weather forecast is ideal, and the trail I have in mind offers some of the most spectacular views in Colorado." "That sounds amazing," I managed to say, though the words felt like poison in my mouth. "I can't wait to experience it with you." Throughout breakfast, I studied Michael's face and behavior for any signs of the sinister planning I'd overheard earlier. But he seemed completely relaxed and genuinely happy, discussing our honeymoon activities with the same enthusiasm he'd always shown for outdoor adventures. Either he was an incredibly skilled actor, or he possessed a disturbing ability to compartmentalize his murderous intentions alongside his role as a loving husband. After breakfast, Michael suggested we spend the day exploring downtown Aspen and maybe doing some shopping for souvenirs. The normalcy of his suggestions would have been comforting under different circumstances, but now I interpreted every plan as a potential setup for surveillance or isolation. "Actually," I said, thinking quickly, "I should probably check in with David about a few client issues that were pending when we left for the wedding. You know how anxious I get when I'm completely disconnected from work." Michael's expression flickered with something that might have been annoyance, but he quickly covered it with understanding concern. "Of course, honey. Your business is important, and I know you can't completely shut off your professional responsibilities even during our honeymoon." "It'll just take an hour or so," I assured him. "Maybe we could meet up for lunch, and then I'll be completely present for the rest of our trip." Michael agreed readily, suggesting I use the resort's business center while he went for a longer hike to explore some of the local trails. His eagerness to separate from me for several hours might have been innocent, but given what I'd overheard, I suspected he wanted time for more private phone calls with Tyler. As soon as Michael left for his hike, I rushed to the business center and began frantically researching everything I could find about his previous marriage. I'd never felt the need to investigate his past before, trusting his explanations about an amicable divorce from his college sweetheart. Now I realized how naive and dangerous that trust had been. What I discovered during that frantic hour of internet searching shattered every remaining illusion about the man I'd married. Michael's first wife hadn't divorced him and moved to the East Coast. Karen Thompson had died 3 years earlier in what was ruled an accidental fall during a hiking trip in Rocky Mountain National Park. The newspaper articles about her death were brief, but contained details that made my blood run cold. Karen had been an experienced hiker who knew the area well, but she'd apparently fallen from a cliff during what was described as a routine sunset hike with her husband. Michael had been hiking ahead of her on the trail and discovered her body at the bottom of a rocky ravine after she failed to catch up with him. The investigation had been thorough, but ultimately concluded that Karen's death was a tragic accident. Michael had been questioned extensively but was never considered a suspect, particularly since he had no apparent motive for harming his wife. However, I noticed that the articles mentioned Karen had recently increased her life insurance coverage as part of their financial planning discussions. Further searching revealed that Karen had been a successful real estate agent with substantial personal assets, and that Michael had inherited everything following her death. The insurance payout alone had been significant enough to allow him to expand his architectural firm and purchase a larger home in one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. The parallels to my own situation were terrifying and unmistakable. Like Karen, I was a successful professional woman with substantial assets and life insurance. Like Karen, I had recently married Michael and updated my beneficiary information. And like Karen, I was being taken on a romantic hiking trip to an isolated location where an accident could easily occur. But unlike Karen, I now knew about Tyler's existence and involvement in whatever Michael was planning. The text messages I'd glimpsed suggested that Karen's death had been murder, not an accident, and that they were planning to use the same method on me. I printed copies of every article about Karen's death and hid them in my suitcase, knowing I would need evidence if I survived long enough to expose Michael's crimes. I also began composing detailed emails to David Chen and my lawyer, documenting everything I'd discovered and overheard, though I wasn't sure when or how I'd be able to send them safely. The most challenging part was maintaining my facade of innocent happiness when Michael returned from his hike. He was in an excellent mood, describing the beautiful scenery he'd encountered, and his excitement about sharing similar experiences with me later in the week. "The trail conditions are perfect right now," he said enthusiastically. "Thursday's sunset hike is going to be absolutely magical. I can't wait to show you some of the most incredible views you've ever seen." His genuine enthusiasm for what I now believed was my planned murder location was perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire nightmare. Michael seemed to derive real pleasure from the thought of taking me to the place where he intended to kill me, as if the anticipation of my death was genuinely exciting for him. That evening during dinner at the resort's elegant restaurant, I found myself studying other couples around us and wondering how many women might be in situations similar to mine without realizing it. How many charming, successful men were capable of such elaborate deception and calculated violence? How many wives and girlfriends were completely unaware that their loving partners were planning their deaths? Michael was the perfect dinner companion, attentive and romantic, making jokes that had me laughing despite my inner terror. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine to celebrate our marriage and made several toasts about our bright future together. The irony of his words was almost unbearable, but I forced myself to play along, knowing that any deviation from expected behavior could accelerate whatever timeline he and Tyler had established. After dinner, as we walked hand in hand through the resort's beautifully landscaped gardens under a canopy of stars, Michael pulled me close and kissed me with what seemed like genuine passion. "I love you so much, Jessica," he whispered against my ear. "These past 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life. I want to spend every remaining day making you as happy as you've made me." The words should have been romantic and reassuring. Instead, they filled me with dread, as I realized he might be referring to the limited number of days I had left to live. If Thursday was when they planned to execute their scheme, I had less than 72 hours to figure out how to survive. That night, lying beside Michael in our honeymoon suite while he slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling and tried to formulate a plan that might save my life. I couldn't run away because we were in an isolated mountain resort with limited transportation options, and disappearing would immediately alert Michael that I'd discovered his intentions. I couldn't call the police because I had no concrete evidence of any planned crime, just overheard conversations and suspicious coincidences that might not be enough to warrant intervention. My best option seemed to be gathering more evidence while secretly preparing countermeasures that might protect me when Thursday arrived. I needed to find a way to record Michael and Tyler's conversations, document their plans, and create some kind of insurance policy that would ensure the truth came out, even if they succeeded in killing me. The thought of potentially dying in just a few days was almost paralyzing, but I forced myself to focus on survival rather than fear. I had built a successful business from nothing, through determination and strategic thinking. Now I needed to apply those same skills to the most important challenge of my life, staying alive long enough to expose the truth about my husband's murderous intentions. As Michael slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about our romantic sunset hike and his impending insurance windfall, I began mentally preparing for the fight of my life. I had married a killer, but I was determined not to become his next victim. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.